Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I am your host, Haley Hayhurst. Today, my guest is Lucia Ortega. She is a first-gen Latina business owner, and she has various businesses that we talk about, various business ventures. She really has a lot of information to share today about, following what feels good to you and what will make you money and making money from your passions. This conversation is really awesome. So Lucia herself inspires first-gen business owners to make their ideas a reality. So for any business owners who are thinking about starting to create content or starting a business and are really excited about those ideas but are feeling a resistance that prevents you from taking the next step, which I know a lot of people experience when they're starting a business. If you just don't know where to start or are feeling overwhelmed, definitely listen to this episode. Lucia focuses on helping first-gen, BIPOC, and women bring their ideas to life, and together she will help you create a plan to help you take action. So we talk a lot about money on this. She helps people with their money, getting their money right. One of the action steps she shares at the end of the episode is really getting good with money. So she shares a lot of advice on that. She also owns a Mexican food stand called Sierra Mexican Cuisine in Los Angeles. If you're in Los Angeles or nearby, her food looks amazing. I wish I was closer, but I will put the address in the show notes so you can go check out that stand as well as all of her links. So we talk about how she started this, why she started this business alongside, her coaching business. She has a lot of great information to share in this, especially for any marginalized community. This is definitely the episode for you to listen to because Lucia has overcome so many adversities to get to where she is, and she just has such amazing advice. I'm so thankful that she joined me on this podcast to share her story, her struggles, her successes. I really love this episode, so let's get right into it. Hey, Lucia, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Haley, for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So I found you on Instagram. You have a great Instagram. You have a lot of content, and you're a business owner who does coaching, but you also own a restaurant. So if you want to introduce yourself, I would love to learn more about you.
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm Lucia or Lucy. My Instagram handles and social medias are by Lucia Ortega. And yes, I do coaching, but my main focus right now is actually a food business. It's not a restaurant yet. It's a trailer. So it's a food stand here in LA. It's very common since we have really nice weather for the most part of the year. So it's a food trailer. We are serving Mexican food, specifically Poblano food. Puebla is a state in Mexico, so it's a very particular type of cuisine.
I love that. That's really awesome. And you run that with your family, correct?
Yeah, so I'm the main owner and do basically a lot of different things. My mom is basically the chef, the main cook, not at the stand, but like prepping the food is what she does. And me and my cousin are there at the food stand.
Very cool. So it is like a family business. I love that. And what you talk a lot about on Instagram, in addition to your food business, is empowering first generation business owners to follow their dreams. How has this come to be? Like, how did you decide that this was going to be your niche? What started this? I'd love to learn more about that.
Yes, actually, it's been sitting in my drafts, a newsletter, and I think of what sparked, right, becoming a business owner. I have actually been changing businesses. I mean, I have just run multiple at the same time. And now the food business is like something that I focus so much on just because it takes a lot of time. It has just been a huge investment that I've been making on it. Also, I want to thank my dad. I forgot to mention him. He literally takes time off work to help me set up. So it is a family business. And so the way my spark for business started when back in 2018, when my dad's dad, my grandfather, was having health complications. He actually ended up passing away a couple months after, but we went to visit him in Mexico. And I remember I was already a teacher. It was my second year teaching, or maybe even third. And I remember going with my dad, to Mexico, and I bought my flight on a credit card. And I didn't really have much money. I was in credit card consumer debt. I was paying for grad school, and I just remember being there with my dad and feeling like I can't give any money to my dad to give to his dad, right? Like I just felt a shame and a lot of guilt, a big responsibility as the oldest daughter. And I remember thinking, I have to do something about this. I can't, like, I'm single, I have no kids. My parents are still healthy. Like, what's gonna happen in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where like, am I not gonna be able to pay for anything, for any emergencies? And that's when my mind went into like, okay, you have to get better with your money. And what I mean with that's like actually budgeting, right? I had tried to, and I was always not being successful at it. Actually saving money, not just putting it in the account and taking it out, and all these other things that I have been wanting to do with my money. And that's how I started creating a plan. But my mind also went into like, your income is not enough. And then I'm like, how am I going to make more money? And then the idea of starting a party rental business came to mind. And I just went on OfferUp. I don't know if you're familiar with that app where you buy and sell things. And I found party rental equipment, and I found this lady who had a business who was selling it for personal reasons. And I think I bought it for her for like 9-10 grand when I came back from Mexico. And that's how I started my business journey. And then from there, I just fell in love with business, just the customer service side of it, the return of investment side. There's just so many things about businesses that I fell in love with. And when I started to reflect, I realized, my family we come from a line of entrepreneurs, actually. My mom's side, my grandma was a food vendor. She sold all these things. She had a store. My mom also is an entrepreneur. She actually never really had an actual 9-to-5 job. And it all started to make sense. But I think when I reflected on why I had suppressed that side of me, it was because the patriarchy in my family, like the way the hierarchy was, like the men have the money, the men have the ideas, the men have the businesses. And then it all makes sense of why I had always played myself small in life. And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to take that back. And that's how I started doing more businesses.
Wow, what a story. I love that a lot. That's very empowering. So when you decided you wanted to get out of this credit card debt and, have more money to be able to help your family, it sounds like that was really the motivator there to get your money right. So what advice do you have for someone who's maybe where you were? You said like 3 years ago, that was you?
Almost 5 years, like 4.5.
5 years. Okay. So if someone is where you were 5 years ago, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to just go for it. Literally go for it. I think a lot of the times, and something you even told me before we got on the call, right? A lot of people think about it. And then once you start doing, you're like, oh, this is not that hard. Like I could have done this, and the same thing. So just, you're going to make mistakes. And that's the other thing I want to say is there's going to be 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, you're going to be like, oh, this is, I made it happen. But the other thing, right? Our mind always goes to like negative mode. Sometimes we're like, oh, like if I can go back 3 years, I would have done all of this more different, because we start to reflect on our mistakes. Instead of like being happy that our accomplishments, we start to be like, oh, I would have done this different and this different and this different. And I would have been even farther ahead in life, right? And I think that's what I tell a lot, especially my siblings. I'm like, you can spend your whole life reflecting on it and thinking of all the different ways you could have done better, but don't do that. Just keep on going. It's not serving you at all. And that's what I would say. So go with it, and also learn from your mistakes and just keep on going.
I love that. And you work with first generation business owners, BIPOC, and women. And so I'd love to hear like how you help these people face the common challenges that you may see. Like, what advice do you have? How do you help them? And can you address some of those common challenges maybe?
Yes. So I think one of the things that I have noticed is that a lot, especially first gen BIPOC women, our jobs are in a lot of social, like we do a lot of work in social industries, right? And what does that mean? Because there are a lot of these jobs that are of service, we get paid less. I see that my clients struggle with making more moves that they want. The one challenge that I see is that a lot of my clients who are BIPOC, Persian, women, we're not getting paid enough. We're getting underpaid. And even if you budget, like you can be so good with your money, but if you're not earning enough, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's where increasing your income comes into play. And that is one of the things when I was helping my clients budget their money and like see how much was coming in, how much was going out. I'm like, you only have $10. I mean, that I'm not going to say don't invest in those $10, but how are you? I can't expect their emergency fund to be at 4 figures, 5 figures if they can only do $10, right, per paycheck or per month. So that's not serving them either. So that's where I will be like, okay, what are some ways we can make more money? And for me, I love helping people make money from their passions because we deserve it. Like we deserve to make money from things that bring us joy and like sparks like our passions. And I think again, a lot of the work that we will end up doing, a lot of the businesses come from a place of like actual service.
Totally. And that makes me think like, especially when you're starting a business, really for anyone, like pricing your rates can be a challenge, but I think definitely for the people that you're helping, maybe it's a little harder to make those rates what they should be, especially if you're being underpaid, right? So, do you talk to your clients about how to price their services?
Yes, so those are a couple of things. I have given them my examples from the different businesses that I have run. And one thing I do is I kind of walk them through like, okay, so they're like, okay, I wanna do photography. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your rate? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I start giving them those questions, right, from a business perspective. Okay, well, if you have a photo shoot session, how many hours do you have to be there, right? Then they start making the time, 2, 3 hours. All right, how long is it going to take you, right? 1 to 2 hours. Okay, what about editing? A couple more hours. And then we start to think about, okay, well, then it's 10 hours that you're going to put into this work. What is your rate? What do you want to earn? Or what is at least the minimum rate that you're earning right now, your work, right? And they're like, okay, well, I'm earning this amount. Okay, let's multiply it by that amount. Okay. And then that's how I start getting them to think. But I'm like, okay, well, but then you're also now, if you're doing this, you have to make sure that you're accounting for the taxes that you have to pay. That can be anywhere from like 15 to 30%. Then they're like, oh, right. So because if you wanted to charge 1,000, now you're gonna have to charge 1,200. I start making them to think about the numbers. And then they're like, you know what? Yep, I want to charge this amount. And so instead of wanting to charge $800, they're gonna now charge almost double or 75, 50% more because they're like, okay, I see what I have to actually charge.
Yeah, and that's really powerful that you kind of walk them through all those steps. I'm thinking of like back when I started my business 3 years ago, and it was my first time in entrepreneurship. And I remember asking for money was like so scary to me. And I think as a woman, this is just a thing that is very common. Like asking for money or asking for things is just nerve-wracking. And so once you kind of like show your clients what they should charge, do you talk to them about the mindset tips that go into it?
I do. And it's something that I tell them, you just gonna have to work through it. No coaching will help. And this is why I enjoy walking my clients through these different scenarios because then they start getting more comfortable, right? Because if I wouldn't, they'll be just like, oh, I'll charge 800. But then I'm like, well, you can go charge 800, but from trial and error, from every different session you go, you're going to feel exhausted. You're going to be like, oh, when I start making the math, I'm actually only charging $10 an hour instead of 15 at least, right? Or 18 or 20 or 25 or more. But I think I always tell them it's just a matter of practicing. And the only way you can practice is by actually putting yourself out there and actually doing the work.
Do you want to start growing your business rapidly in a really fun way? Do you want to increase your visibility and profits? I have just the thing for you. My course, Great Guesting: How to Grow Your Business Through Being a Podcast Guest, is now available, and it's guaranteed to get you on podcasts. Do you want to connect with more clients, share your story, make stronger connections, and grow your audience? But do you find that you're second guessing yourself? are indecisive on a topic because you're into so many things and thinking, is this even possible? You'll love this step-by-step guide on how to be a podcast guest. We go over 6 lessons that are knowing your story, narrowing down the topic, finding podcasts to be on, setting up your audio, preparing to record, and of course, marketing, because that's what I'm all about. Being a guest can be fun, but if you don't have a plan to go with it, you're really just spending the hour talking. You're not moving your business forward, and that's exactly what this course is designed to teach you. You can find this course on my website at Espresso Podcast Production, and I guarantee you that you will be a guest on podcasts in no time. Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I think the mindset piece is really important. So once they go into all of that, then you help them with kind of the money mindset, all of these things. I know we talked a little bit about like the challenges. Is there any other ones that you would love to share that maybe someone is going through that you can help them kind of work through in this?
Yes, for me, one thing that I have noticed a lot is debt. I would I have always said it. My party rental business, I actually got a loan at a credit union to buy it. Because when I started, and this is one thing that we struggle a lot, especially like first gen or anyone that has had debt and has paid it off, they feel scared. They're like, why would I go into more debt? But the reason I started my business was to get out of debt. And I got into 10 grand more into debt so I could pay all of that all of that money. And it doesn't make, someone will be like, that doesn't make sense. Why did you get into more debt? But here's the thing. Like if I would have saved 10 grand to finally get a business, it would have taken me at least a year and a half or two. And in that year and a half, after starting my rental business, not only did I think I paid over 10 grand in credit card debt, I paid off 10 grand of the party business, and I paid off my grad school. So that was almost 30 grand that I paid in a year and a half from both budgeting and my business that I had started. Does that make sense? So in a year and a half, I was able to do all of that because I also had a business. I had a second source of income coming in.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, right? A lot of us, we're scared. We're scared of going into debt. I mean, maybe this is just my personal opinion. I feel like for me, I have leveraged, right? We have to leverage the debt. I mean, if you really believe in, and I mean, everyone should believe in themselves, right? But if you really believe that you have a good idea, that you need the money, you're going to make it work. There's just no way unless something, really goes wrong. But I really truly believe that if you really believe in yourself, whatever investment you made, even if it's just $500 investment, right, that you put on a credit card, you can flip that into 5 grand, 10 grand. So it's just a matter of really believing yourself and making it work. I mean, I speak Spanish, so there's like no, I mean, it's kind of like once you hit a rock bottom, there's just nowhere to go. But
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And another thing that I was thinking about when preparing for this call is kind of like how generational wealth plays into like all of this, and then how like the lack of generational wealth may also play into this. So especially for when you're pricing your products, if you've never, had money before, like that's a big thing. Have you worked with clients who maybe are experiencing, having money maybe for the first time and like wanting to get back to their family, but also wanting to save and going through all those different things? Like I know you're very close with your family, as you've said, so you started this to help them, but then how do you also help yourself and like prioritize your future as well?
yes, I mean, a lot of my clients, I'm the oldest, and a lot of my clients have also been the oldest in their family. And this is why they start getting good with their money, right? Or healing these money wounds because they're like, I have no one to help me. And I have other siblings that I want to help, right? And I think that's families are just very important, I think, for many first generations, just because first generation, because that's just like our culture. So one thing I have realized, at least I remember one client specifically, they were spending hundreds a month in with their family, like in eating out. And once they looked at their numbers, they were like, I'm gonna have to put these money boundary, like financial boundaries. And the amount of money they started saving was like $500. Like the amount was just insane how they shifted, and they had to sit down and give this talk and be like, hey, I need to save my money. And then they started paying off the debt that they had, right? Because I think a lot of the times, right, we're not going to be we don't tell our problems to our family, right? We're like, if you need this, I'll give it to you, but there's a lot of things that we might be dealing behind the scenes, right, or in silence. And they were able to do a lot of these things by setting these financial boundaries, but they were also very happy. I mean, their family was just like, we totally understand, you have to take care of business, and that was it.
I love that. And I think a lot of people are worried about like what their family is going to think of them or friends, especially when you're starting a business and maybe you're using like your old social media to start promoting it. And you have all this imposter syndrome because you're like, oh my gosh, everyone from high school is going to see this and like blah, 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 and just get so worried and things like that. So that's really great advice. And thank you so much for sharing that. Another part that I wanted to talk about is since you have these two parts of your business, you have your food business and then you also have your coaching. I was looking at you have TikTok and Instagram, and some of your TikToks have so many views, like amazing. So I'd love to hear about how you are utilizing social media to grow your business and just your brand as a whole.
Yes. And so here's one thing I want to say. I have my social media has evolved. Like I started off with a different username, then I changed to another one, and then I changed. Now I just have it by Lucia Ortega, just because for me, again, this is just my experience, my life. The reason my handle is by Lucia Ortega is because I love creating, I love doing a lot of things. I think many people are scared of starting a social media page. You said it earlier about what are other people gonna think. That was my number one fear. I remember I had to delete some people, block them, because I'm like, I don't want them to see who I am now, right? Like, what are they gonna think? Like, they're gonna think I'm being too much, too extra, all of this, and that was one of my fears. The other fear was like, whatever handle I start off, I have to keep it. And the reality is, I have changed my handle a couple times, and I have thought about it a lot, and like, what are people going to say, and what's going to happen to my followers. But honestly, I always have to remember, what is my mission, what am I doing this for me. At this point, my social media, like by Lucia Ortega, is just to share my experiences as a first gen Mexican American, oldest daughter, like all these different parts of me. That's my main focus. And Sierra Mexican Cuisine is my food business. And the reason I have two is because my food business, I wanted to be like just my food business. I don't want to start putting things about my family in there unless it's related to the business, because I feel like at the end of the day, I want to share my own personal experiences, because they really have shaped how I see business and how I run business.
Mm, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The separation of the two, and then also like how you prioritize what you're posting. And I noticed on your TikTok, a lot of the videos that have gone viral and people are really engaging with are definitely the ones where you show your family and your culture and, different things about your life. And so I think that really shows that people are wanting to like connect with you and like learn more. And definitely that will, I'm sure, help both of your businesses grow.
Yes. And I'll be very honest, I haven't said it out loud. So this is where I'm saying it the first time. I was struggling a lot with putting my food business, or because I left teaching. I was a teacher. And then once I became a full-time food business owner, I was having like an identity crisis, because for 5 years, my whole identity, right? Like I just didn't know how. It just felt like a breakup, and then having to deal with like who I was becoming again. And I it has only been until like a couple weeks ago that in my personal, if you kind of scroll through, in my personal business, my personal account, I talk more about being a business owner full time, because it was just very difficult sometimes. And that's the reality. Like, especially like social media, you kind of get used to posting a particular type of content, that when you have a shift in your personal life, it's like you also have to do that shift in your social media accounts. And I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be. But I think that's I again I had to go back to my mission of like, well, what am I trying to accomplish? And the thing is, I'm trying to empower other first generation BIPOC women to start their own businesses, and not just their businesses, but businesses that they're passionate about, right?
Mm, totally, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for like being open and sharing that because you're so right. It is kind of like an identity crisis in a way of like, what am I doing? How am I going to make this work? Like, I'm sure going from a teacher to what you do now was a big shift in everything. And, you have to reintroduce yourself in different ways. And so that's really powerful. And again, I want to thank you for sharing that open and honestly.
Yes, and I think that's another advice that I would give people. I think if we start to think, businesses tend to fail at the 2-year mark. And that's one, right? We also are human, and we evolve. I think we evolve for like almost every day, but I think if we start to think about sometimes our what we're passionate about changes. And I think sometimes, especially if you are the first person in your family to build wealth or to start getting good with money, right, quote unquote, it can feel a lot of guilt and be like, let me continue doing this, right? Let me just, if not, I'm gonna be a quitter. If not, I'm gonna look bad, right? And we put ourselves last. And I think this is why, if you start to think about, like, it makes sense why so many people are stuck in these bad relationships or bad jobs, because they're like, if I do this right for my own good, I'm gonna let people down, right? My family, my friends, people who look up to me. And that's one thing I have realized. You know what? And I always tell them, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make my food business a successful business. But I also know there might be a time where I'm like, you know what? This is just as far as I wanted to go, and I have to move on, and that's okay.
Totally, totally. Just like being honest and with yourself is very key. So, Lucy, I have loved everything that you've shared today, and I know your food business is going to be so successful. I'm looking at the photos of your food, the reels you've created. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. I wish I was in LA to come by.
Yes, come by. I would love to have you anytime anyone wants to come. And I think for me, that's the other thing. Like, I could have been a, and this is another thing I also tell people. There's some businesses that are gonna leave you a lot more money. Like, I know if I was coaching full time, I would have more money than I have now. Running a food business is not a joke. It takes a lot. It's high expenses. Money comes in, but also a lot of high expenses that I have. But I love what I do, and I think for me, the food that my where my family's from, we're from a very small town, like less than 500 people live there, and there was no roads, no light, electricity until like 20-25 years ago. And for me, it's my mission to put our name and our food in the map, especially here in LA. And that's my goal, right? To put no food in the food map, especially here in LA, where we have just a lot of Mexican food and it's really good. And I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, and if someone wants to come by, where in LA are you located?
Yeah, I'm here in South LA. It's on 12724 Central. Those who know will know. But if you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you will see it. We are a food stand, so it's just on the street. But I'm more than happy to have anyone, and you'll enjoy and love our food. I mean, that's my goal. And eventually, right now, at least for now, my goal is a food truck, and then eventually maybe a brick and mortar. I mean, again, businesses change. There's so many different ways a business can go. And I think at the moment is one step at a time. For me, a food truck will be the next big thing that I will be doing. And then we'll see from there what we're going to do.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm really excited to continue to follow you and see where it does take you and where you decide to take it. So, this is how I wrap up every episode. I would love it if you could share 3 actionable business or life tips that the audience can start with today to move forward in their business or money or whatever it is you want to challenge the audience to do. I would love to hear those 3 action challenge steps.
3 things that I would tell anyone to do as action steps would be: one, ask yourself what you want to do in the next year. I think a lot of us wait until the new year to get started. I mean, we're already in Q2 of 2023. Time goes by quickly. So asking yourself, what do I want to do? What do I really want to do? And I think once you ask yourself that question and you're honest, you're like, oh, you're going to realize that there's some things that are just not sitting well, or that you're doing that you're like, I really don't like doing this. The number two, I would say, start working on yourself one way or another. I mean, and not just start working on yourself. I say, like, give yourself time, give yourself some love. That can either be like clearing your schedule to go to the gym or yoga or spending more time with friends. I feel like a lot of the times we just get caught up in routine that we forget to do things that makes us happy, like as a people, as regular humans, like, you know, remove that hat as a business owner, as a worker, as whatever. Just focus on yourself. Like, what do you really want to do? And I think the third one would be start, quote unquote, getting good with money. Because I don't want to, I know it might sit wrong with some people when I say quote unquote get good with money, but just start looking at like your money and be like, you know what, how's my budget? Am I investing? If not, how can I get started? And I feel like there's just so much information online. I mean, you can follow me, and or you can follow many content creators that create content for money and business. I mean, you can listen to this podcast and continue to listen to it. I'm pretty sure so many people will give you so many good tips on money and on business. And I think just educate yourself in that sense. I mean, it's free 99 on the internet, on YouTube, on Google. I know it's a hard step. I think maybe even a fourth one, I would say, find accountability buddy. Like, literally, I had a friend today that I texted her yesterday actually, and I was like, hey, please drop by my food business. I need to create more content because I'm not creating the type of content that I'm missing one part, one type of content. And I'm like, I need you, please. And so I guess then the fifth one I think will be ask for help. Like, literally, people want to help you. There are people that want to help you. Maybe they might not have a lot of time in their hands, but they're going to answer at least one or two questions. Like today, I called this guy who I know owns a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant. And I'm like, hey, I need some questions to be answered. And he literally took 10-15 minutes of his day. So people are out there to help you.
I love all of those. Thank you so much for sharing, Lucy. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you? You told us where your restaurant is, but on social media, where's like the best place to connect with you?
Yes, on social media, by Lucia Ortega. That's my handle for more first gen content, older sister content, business content. My food business is Sierra Mexican Cuisine. You can also find me on both Instagram and on TikTok.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been so much fun. And the older sister content, I totally get that. I'm also the oldest. So all of my friends and my sister's friends come to me for advice. And I'm like, oh, being the oldest never stops.
Oh, yes. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for having me. I really
Thank you. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.